Reverend EJ George, The Good Soil That Embraced the Seed. Audiobook by Mathews George. Prologue. Matthew 13 presents to us the parable of the sower. The seeds that fell into the good soil bore much fruit. Here are some recollections on a person who was the good soil. Chapter 1. Storyteller. 1994. He turned around in his vestments and read the Gospel. It was the story of Zacchaeus and Jesus. Instead of chanting as clergy usually do, he read it as though he was telling a story to his grandchildren. He was already an elderly, retired clergy by then. His tone was peaceful, non-threatening, and endearing. The 8-year-old me was fascinated by the narrated Bible story, the opening lines of which cannot be forgotten. Once Jesus was passing through Jericho. It was from Luke 19 verse 1. A couple of decades later, when I was ordained, I decided to read the Gospel like a story, just the way the elderly clergyman did during Holy Communion, simply because I thought people would listen carefully, since the 8-year-old me had. The name of that clergyman was Reverend EJ George. Chapter 2. Love in White Robes. 2023. As I hear the news of his passing away, I am left with a void. Almost every clergyman who has met him has a story to tell. It usually goes like this. EJ George Achen met me, shook my hands, and held on to my hand, asking who all I had at home, and inquired everything about me. He took down my birthday and entered it in a diary. Then he shared some of his ministry experiences and told me his latest thoughts on ways to share the gospel. Then he would take my address down. A few weeks later, I received a postcard from him in which he wrote a story or a quote or some encouragement, along with reminding me to share the gospel with someone. This would usually take a long time. His conversation never ended quickly. When he met you again, he would inquire about life, family, ministry, the challenges, the possibility, the concern of the flock entrusted to us, everything. It often had an abrupt ending since people had to go somewhere or the other, and George Achen would be still wanting to engage with us in meaningful ways to share the gospel. If you met him on the sandbed at Maraman Convention, he would continue the same. Under an evening sun that is on its way down for the day, he would hold your hand and inquire everything about you. He would say a word or two that would be tremendously encouraging. He would share ways to speak about the gospel to another. He would inquire about your mum's health because you had told him the last time you met that she was feeling sick. Now, if you were on your way with someone waiting on the other end of the sandbed and you saw EJ George Achen coming towards you, it was common for many a clergy to take a slightly different route. It wasn't because they did not love Achen, it was because Achen loved you so much. And love takes time. Love pays attention. Love remembers. Love enquires. Love has all the time in the world for you. And he was a clergyman, which meant that he was supposed to be God's love in white robes. That he was, dare I say, one of the last of his kind. As someone stated, they don't make him like him anymore. But pastors like me lacked that kind of love. Or someone you loved more was waiting on the other end of the sandbed. Or your ride home from Maraman Convention was awaiting your arrival while everyone else was seated. Either way, encountering EJ George Achen meant an uncertainty regarding one's ETA, estimated time of arrival, which became complicated when you were traveling to Maraman in a group. So, you would simply take another route. You chose not to walk into love because we have reached that point in life where we do not have time for love. But EJ George Achen was love in white robes. Sometimes he would be talking to someone alongside the thatched Maraman Pandal, the tent made out of thatched coconut tree leaves at the Maraman Convention sandbed. And you felt safe to walk past him because he was already holding someone's hand and talking. So you whiz past, but he looks at you and holds your hand, continues the conversation with the other person for a minute more, and then turns to you, all the while without having left his tender grip on your arm. Chapter 3 Trinity and the Little Flock. 2015. It's another Maraman convention and I bump into EJ George Achen at the drinking water tap near the clergy shed. Achen ippa evadiya? Where is Achen serving at the moment? He asks me. I tell him that I serve as a youth chaplain in Mumbai. So do you have a parsonage? I tell him about the diocese arrangement. I stay at the Sakinaka Trinity Marthoma Church parsonage, although the vicar is Reverend Ashish Thomas George, who is also the vicar at Vikroli Marthoma Church. It's a small parish, with a small community, I tell him. He invites my attention to Luke chapter 12 verse 32, which says, Do not be afraid, little flock, for your Father has been pleased to give you the kingdom. He looks at me and says, You should read this verse to them and tell them that the Father will give them the kingdom. Their church's name is Trinity, is it not? You should teach them about the Trinity and the love between the Father, the Son and the Holy Spirit, and ask them to live in love for each other. He was ever ready with a verse, an illustration, a story, a true pastor. And then he would inquire about my father, my mother and my brother, whom he knew well. He once told me to hang a sign with the verse, Your brother has come, from Luke 15:27, in our drawing room. When someone from another faith came home, they would get curious and would ask what this meant. Then you could begin a conversation with the parable of the lost son, where these words are found. This will enable you to start a conversation about God's love with someone who does not know it, he said. Later, I found out that he had shared this idea with so many pastors. Some made their own signboards. Some were given one by EJ George Achen himself so that they may begin a conversation about God's love. Chapter 4 He Only Takes the Best. 2014. It was my first clergy conference. On the third day, my cousin Marin, who's Reverend Marin Matthew, and I had got to know that our beloved Kunyuwal auntie, who had been suffering from cancer, was in a critical stage. Towards the end of the evening, we got the news that sank our hearts. Auntie went to sleep in the Heavenly Father's arms. She had fought hard. She was brave and always, always graceful. They arranged for a bed for her in the vestry at church so that she could attend the wedding of her younger daughter. Her younger daughter, my cousin, sister, Susan's groom, Sushil, a chivalrous man, and his family were willing to suddenly shift the wedding from Hyderabad to Mumbai on short notice, just for her. In the end, she entered her well-deserved rest. Our uncle Babuchan called and said that our sisters, that is their daughters, wanted us to be there for the funeral which would be held the day after. We really wanted to be there too, but the clergy conference was yet to end and it had one more day. And how do you get to Mumbai so quick? They arranged for us to fly the very next day. This meant we had to leave the clergy conference there and then. We completed the sessions for the day, had dinner and packed our bags. One of Marin Achen's classmates were heading to town and we could hop in and get a drop to where we could catch a bus home. So we set out with our bags. As I walked down the stairs and reached the front of the CEC Center dormitory, I could see Marin Achen a few hundred feet away, waving for me from the car. His friend, a fellow clergy who was on the driver's seat, had an expression which seemed to say, "Come along, I need to get home quick." That is when I saw EJ George Achen coming towards my side. I thought of avoiding him and whizzed past some clergymen in the hope that he would not see me, since there was no time and my friends were already in the car. As I dashed past, as though I hadn't seen EJ George Achen, he called my name. I couldn't but stop. "How are you?" he asked. I quickly explained in an apologetic tone that my aunt had passed away and I had to leave immediately. My eyes fell on my friends seated in the car some distance away, and I could see that they knew what I knew. This is going to take time. "Sorry, Achen, I have to go. My friends are waiting. I have to reach Trivandrum tonight," I said. "What happened to your aunt? Was she unwell?" "Sorry, Achen, I shift my bag from one shoulder to the other and say that I have to leave, adding that she passed away due to cancer." By now, he's holding my hand, that tender hand on my bony palm. And time is ticking away. The Achens in the car, including my cousin brother Marin, were my seniors, and I suddenly felt a shiver. They are going to get mad at me now. "Did she have any children? What about her husband?" Achen continues to inquire calmly. "How are they?" EJ George Achen being classic EJ George Achen at the wrong time, I thought to myself. She has 2 daughters. One is in Dubai with her family and the other one completed higher studies in physiotherapy from England, and she has been taking care of her mother full time during the last few months. She got married recently. "I'm so sorry, Achen, I have to go. I'm very sorry." I stopped looking towards the car. "Oh, what are her daughters' names?" I'm not liking this, but I love EJ George Achen. Yet I really have to get to Trivandrum tonight. "It's Bincy and Susan, Achen. Bincy is the elder one and Susan is the younger one." I blurt out additional information that would hopefully preempt another question. "Sorry, Achen, I have to leave." Achen asked me to wait and he took out his Bible from his shoulder bag, a Sanji. I took a quick glance across the shoulders of the elderly clergyman and saw the simmering faces of my friends in the car who are now animated, beckoning me to rush. He took out a piece of paper from his Bible and said, "You must give this to Bincy and Susan and tell them that I am praying for them." "I certainly will, Acha. Thank you. Bye." I ran and entered the car. I folded the piece of paper that Achen handed me and placed it safely in my wallet while I heard my friends commenting on how late I made all of us. The next day I was at the home of my sisters. After the services at home, the mortal remains of our aunt would be taken to the Christian cemetery at Shivri, where Malad Apachan, their grandfather with whom they had a deep bond, was also buried. Malad to Shivri in Mumbai traffic is a nightmare. The service at Shivri was to start at 12. We left at 11. Marinachan, Bincy Chechi, Susan and I were in the same vehicle on our way. After nearly an hour, I suddenly remember about the piece of paper. I take it out of my wallet and hand it to them, still unfolded, with a one-line introduction. An elderly Achen asked me to give this to you. Bincy reads and bursts out crying. She gives it to Susan, who can't hold back her tears. I was shocked. What was in the paper? Was this a bad idea? Bincy turns to me and says, "This was the answer I was looking for." Susan agrees. They both want to know who this mysterious clergyman is and why he gave this piece of paper to some stranger. I introduce Achen and tell them the story of his life. Now they both want to meet him. They hand me the paper and I recognize the familiar handwriting that I have seen on the postcards, which bore my name as well as much encouragement. It was a poem titled, "He Only Takes the Best." He only takes the best. God saw she was getting tired, and a cure was not to be. So he put his arms around her and whispered, "Come with me." With tear-filled eyes, we watched her suffer and fade away. Although we loved her deeply, we could not make her stay. A golden heart stopped beating. Hard-working hands put to rest. God broke our hearts to prove to us He only takes the best. A poem by an unknown author. And it was the answer to their questions in the face of their mother's terminal illness. And that came as though a divine intervention from a man I had tried to avoid the day before. Chapter 5. The Personal Retreat. 2019. In a WhatsApp conversation with my sister Binsi, she mentioned a conversation with EJ George Achen that lasted an hour. It felt like a personal retreat, she said. Chapter 6. The End of an Era. 2023. On the night of the successful episcopal elections in the Mathews Church, where 3 nominees were elected as bishop candidates, I received a text from my sister Vinci. Georgie, I heard something about EJ George Achen and I hope it's not true. I hadn't heard anything yet, so I went to our church's clergy WhatsApp group and found condolence messages streaming. It's true, I told her, recognizing that it was the end of an era and a beginning of a new one, a world without EJ George Achen. Epilogue. But the seed falling on good soil refers to someone who hears the word and understands it. This is the one who produces a crop, yielding 100, 60 or 30 times what was sown. Matthew 13:23. EJ George Achen, you will be dearly missed.